Welcome to Awaken the Mind, the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, hosted by David Uhas.
You're listening to Awaken the Mind, the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, a podcast that inspires the curious to the professional to discover meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name is David Uhas, and I'm a master NLP practitioner and hypnotist, best known for losing over 100 pounds and running 6 marathons in 2 years. And I'm sitting down with hypnotists, NLP practitioners, and coaches to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact in the lives of others. Our guest today is Kirby Ingles. Over the past 2 decades, Kirby has taken on numerous leadership development positions across the world, equipping human resource and executive level leadership the ability to achieve higher performance, leading and growing their teams. Now he specializes in helping fatherless men and veterans go from where they are to where they want to be. He guides and walks alongside them to find their purpose, understand and apply their unique strengths and passion in their personal and professional lives. Kirby works with veterans and fatherless men to build a framework that creates an abundant and satisfying life they desire. Tomorrow, he will be helping you make significant changes in your life so you can impact those within your circle of influence to become agents of change and pillars of the community. Everyone has something remarkable about them, and he wants to help you become extraordinary. Please give a warm welcome to our guest today, Kirby Ingles. Hello, Kirby. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. Lovely weather we're having here. I don't know, what's it like where you're at?
It's pretty warm, actually. South central Missouri here in the Ozarks. The humidity is starting to pick up after we've had some cooler evenings. So you could feel the heat coming on today.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. You live in the Ozarks and you have 4 kids, 2 dogs, and 2 cats.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a full family. I mean, so I kind of grew up in Illinois, and I've moved all over the world over the last 20 years. I've probably moved as many times as I was as a kid as I have as an adult. So, I don't know. I mean, I stopped counting, but it's probably around 20, 21 moves over the course of 40 years. So,
oh, wow.
Been quite a bit. I've been all over the place. I've had a lot of experiences. There's a lot of places I might call home, just because I could pretty much go anywhere and feel at home. And that's based off, the 20 years I served in the military. And then, just my family constantly moving around in Illinois when I was growing up as a kid for various reasons. And I think we're going to probably get into a little bit of that here soon. But I mean, yeah, it's a full family, 4 kids, 3 boys, a daughter. My daughter's the youngest, so she's obviously my little precious jewel. And they range anywhere from 15 years old all the way down to 1. And nice. We love animals. So obviously my wife is a former vet tech and kennel manager. So animals have always been part of our lives and it's part of the family. So
cool. So you're an ultra runner. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I kind of got into ultra running a little bit. I want to say around 2009-ish or so. I've run about 13 ultra marathons. I did that over the course of the years. I kind of had a small 4-year break when I lived in D.C., but then I came back to it, and that's where I kind of set at number 13. I kind of got into that shortly right after I went through my first divorce, and it kind of helped me collect my thoughts, and I found it actually kind of helped me heal my back in a way too, because I had a significant back injury at the time, and I started running as a way to kind of knock some things off my bucket list before I got too old, and actually it kind of helped me reverse the injury with kind of rebuilding the way I run and my posture, and the trails seemed to be very healing holistically as well as physically. And it was less abusive than running on the road to my knees and my back. So it really worked out. And I've met a great community of people who were very supportive of me in the time of need. And that's where my love for it really came. I just really love the community and the people. And I've actually stayed connected with those people and developed stronger relationships with those folks over the years than I have with really anybody else.
Well, I am inspired by you. I had done some running, but the ultra marathons just always have blown my mind.
Yeah, it's really a way to challenge myself, and that's kind of part of my brand too. I mean, um, achieving things that everybody else says you can't do or you don't think you can do yourself. So there's been times where out there where probably the first race that I came to after I'd had a 4-year drought, I was falling apart. Like right after the first 10 miles, I had 20 to go. And so, and I had to, and I stopped, and one of the aid stations, and one of my buddies was there, and I was like, man, I don't know what's going on, and he's like, what are your symptoms? And I told him, and he's like, okay, try this. I got back on the trail and continued around, and just another lap until I finally finished, and I got through it, and I probably wanted to quit 20 times, but I refused to allow myself to quit. And I was like, okay, let's just get me to the next hill or to the next tree or to the next intersection, or and it just one more. And I just kind of started to develop that mentality. And there's some things that you kind of use, like quotes and scripture and other things that you keep in your mind to kind of keep you going and pushing forward, and little tricks along the way. But it was just one more, and eventually I got to the end, and I'm like, man, I thought I was going to quit back there on 10 miles. And I made it 20 more. So it just shows you how far you can really go if you have the right mindset. And nothing is impossible, that you can achieve anything that you set out in this world to do. So.
Well, thank you for serving our country, and also for being an inspiration to those who are going through, whether it's injuries or just getting old and don't think that they can do it. That's really impressive. You're a beacon to those who maybe think they're in that position.
Yeah, you just hit on another topic there. I mean, that's just when I was probably 25, even 30 years old. I thought by the time I was 40 years old, I was going to be broken and old from the military. And that's not the case. It was just, I was when I was 25 and 30, because that's the mindset that I was in. I was just like, oh, I'm old, I'm getting, I run too much, I do this, the Army is breaking me. And then once I hit a certain point in my life, a switch flipped, and I kind of got a hold of my mindset and a lot of my self-limiting thoughts and these things that other people were saying that were entering my head, and I was believing them. And I kind of had to retell the story. You're like, no, this is not the case, and I can do this. I can still do all these things. And I just love the inspirational story. There's a lot of folks out there that have done things that are greater than I have. And it makes me want to go out there and do more stuff because they're able to achieve that. So I have a lot of inspiration out there that's pushing me forward. So. Absolutely.
Well, tell me about yourself growing up. You mentioned you moved a lot, and I don't know if you know, I am from Illinois.
Yeah.
Also, so it's cool that you're from Illinois.
Yeah. So I kind of grew up in a small town, Hillsboro, Illinois. Originally, I was born in Litchfield, which is right alongside the I-55 corridor between St. Louis and Chicago. Yep. And I was born, single mother. Didn't have a father in my life, so that's where the fatherless men thing comes in. And a few years later, my mother met who I call my dad, and they had a child together. They were married for about 6-7 years, but he was always gone working all the time. So I don't even really have a whole lot of memories of my father at home, growing up when I was a child. They got divorced. We were doing pretty well, actually, while they were married. Probably I would say upper middle class. And when they got divorced, we were in a small trailer park, and life was a shell shock to me because, quality of life had changed. And I wasn't really sure how to react to that. My mom ended up getting remarried eventually when I moved out a little bit further out in the country, lived a country lifestyle, and that's kind of where I started to build my work ethic. My grandfather really came into my life at that time. I was a teenager. And I think he realized at some point that I needed a role model. Not that he was trying to replace any father that I should have had or, could have had. But, most of my stepfathers were working, swing shifts and things like that, and they weren't involved. They weren't really engaged with me because we just didn't connect on a level. So I was kind of out on my own, a latchkey kid. And just figuring out life and chasing my cousin who was 3 years older than me and doing all the things that kids 3 years older than me were doing that they shouldn't have been doing, because I was hanging out with the older crowd. Probably could have gotten into some serious trouble at some point in time. But like I said, I had enough male mentors in my life or people that would step in my life when things got ugly and would kind of just, hey, you need to kind of come back into the fold here a little bit. You're crossing dangerous territory there, or you're in dangerous waters. And so I had enough, self-awareness and sense to kind of stay out of trouble, but I was always within an arm's length away. I could have been in jail and plenty of other places at that point. But I always knew that I had to keep my nose clean, because one day I was going to join the military. So that was one of the things my grandparents always instilled in me was, you need to join the service. You need to serve your country. I have a long history of family members that have served all the way back to the American Revolutionary War and the French and Indian War. That part of my genealogy is very vivid in my mind, and it's kind of a family identity in a way, because most of the males in my family serve in the military, and I'm one of the ones that have actually went as far as I have gone. I've actually gone the farthest out of all of them. So it's a big deal. So that's where a lot of the patriotism and the pride comes from. And my family was a bunch of pioneers growing up. So that's a lot where the work ethic comes, to try and, replicate a lot of that family identity. The Ingles are pioneers. We work hard, and, we're laborers, and we push forward, and we serve. So that's kind of our family identity. So I grew up with a lot of that. So I eventually joined the service. I would say probably when I was about 9. Well, I did when I was a junior in high school. So I joined the National Guard, for a couple of years. And then once I graduated high school, I realized that there wasn't much in small town USA and, Illinois, growing up. I was working on a corporate farm, and I just wasn't making a whole lot of money, and I wasn't getting anywhere, and just kind of said, you know what, I'm just going to do this full time. And I joined the military, and after that I was off. So, and I got to experience life outside of the small farming community for the first time. And that was a shock in its own, but, because it's a bigger world out there than, spending most of your time in corn fields and soybean fields and, tending to hogs and cattle. So.
Nice. What then finally led you into what you do now with coaching and working with military and fatherless men? Yeah,
so I would say, shortly after my only divorce, but my divorce, I really was struggling. My son was in Illinois. I was living in Kansas City at the time, and I was having to travel back and forth. And I really started thinking about it. And I was like, is this really what I want to do? Because at some point in time, they're going to move me, and I'm going to be dislocated from my children. And, that's when the thoughts started triggering, okay, what is life after the military going to be like? What am I going to do? What is my second career going to be? And am I going to get out now, or am I going to go 20 or 30 or, I was struggling through a lot of those decisions. And then shortly after that, I decided to stay in, and I met my wife, and we had 3 children. But prior to that, we got married and moved to Washington, D.C., which was my next duty station. I got there, and I was at a couple workshops because I was still struggling with the decision. Like, am I staying? Am I going? What am I going to do? I was in the HR arena and the military. I knew that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I did not want to work in the HR world in the corporate setting. I was really, for me, I felt like I just didn't want to be in the boardroom. I didn't want to, climb the corporate ladder again. I didn't want to spend all my time in meetings. I didn't want to write policy. Those are the things I just really didn't enjoy. And so I kind of had to do some soul searching. And what is it that I loved about HR and what I did in the Army that I can replicate outside? And a lot of that, when it boiled down to it, I was actually in a leadership position at the time, and I really enjoyed helping young soldiers, young emerging leaders, and individuals move forward in their career, and help them with the challenges. Some of them had some really serious personal challenges that they were going through, and I really enjoyed mentoring them and helping them through those challenges. And really, it was just problem solving. A guy with a little bit of experience and, kind of coaching them through that process, and helping them find answers to their solutions, to their problems. And so I really kind of latched onto that. So I just started Googling stuff, and then coaching was one of those things that popped up. So I signed up for classes at Liberty University. I started my online coursework. I got involved in health and wellness coaching and leadership coaching because those were a couple areas that I was interested in at the time. And as soon as I was about a year into my studies, I just said, you know what? I love this so much that I'm ready to launch my own business. I'm ready to just tackle it. And I coached and, finished up my military service, but continued my military service and finished school all at the same time. I mean, that's how much I really, really enjoyed it. And that's kind of how I got into coaching. It was really a pivotal point, like a pivot point in my life where I had to decide, like, okay, what's next and what does Kirby Ingles look like in the future when he takes this uniform off? And that's how I got going.
What are the statistics or just your experience with men that are in the military and being fatherless?
I'm sure it's high. I don't have a specific number on it. I mean, I was just ran into a guy the other day that was telling me the same story because we were kind of having the same conversation, and his dad was abusive. And when his dad wasn't abusive, his dad wasn't around. So when he was home, he was abusive, and we had a conversation about that. And not that all the fathers are abusive or like that. And that's not, there's a lot of great folks that go in the military that had great parental support. But I would say it is pretty high. I mean, I think a lot of young men go in the military because they're looking for something, and they're looking for some kind of purpose, some kind of calling, something's missing. And there's something about the military structure and the discipline, and that provides that kind of need that kind of helps people not blossom and I would say thrive. Because the system is designed for people to be successful as long as you put their time and energy into it. And there's a lot of great leaders, a lot of great fathers in the military that I've noticed that just love being parents, but also love helping young emerging leaders become successful. We are a profession that grows our own, and we're actually growing our replacements. So if you think about it, we are really growing our replacements for the future that has continued to protect this country and our freedoms for over 200 years.
Well, I was really excited when I was reading your bio that you did coaching with fatherless men, as I shared with you before we started, that my father was in the military. He was in the Korean conflict, and he came back changed. And my mom, we were raised Catholic, and she never divorced. Mm-hmm. Because that was her, her value was and her commitment to her religion. But it's a unique experience that I have that sometimes I feel like I'm an outsider. Growing up, I really felt that way. And so it's cool. I'm really excited to have met somebody else that has gone through something like that. What are some challenges that with the people that you work with? Are there any common challenges that fatherless men have?
Yeah, so one of the things that I noticed, and I noticed in myself, was in the authoritarian figure, because that's the one that comes out the most. Originally, for me, it did. And I thought I had to be very authoritative as a father, and that wasn't the case. And even after, I didn't realize it until after I went through my divorce, and I realized, I was like, man, you're a jerk. I mean, it's like you think that you're in charge of these people, but you're there to mold and mentor and coach and develop and teach them. And you think I wouldn't say they were like my little soldiers, but I mean, it was like my way or the highway. And that's kind of how I was as a leader for a very long time, because that's how you learn. When sometimes you learn from experience and learn from feedback. And it wasn't until after I was in charge of my first little section that I was responsible for, and I left that job and I got some feedback through a 360 survey where some guys were like, hey man, it's like your way or the highway. And there's a lot of people out there that have some creative intelligence that can kind of help you get after what you're trying to do, but you're not letting them because you're being so controlling. And I think that's one of the, you feel like you have to control everything. And some of the things are, you have that missing link, to that. You feel like you've been left out. You feel like you don't have something that the other kids did. So even when I was growing up socially, I probably had a little bit of depression because of that feeling that I was different, or, I was left out, or, I didn't have this really cool dad that went out in the yard and played catch. I kind of did things on my own. And like I said, I didn't really hang out with, my father. I hung out with my older cousin. So I was always chasing them. And the earliest memory, and probably the fondest memory I have with my father, was him teaching me to ride my bike. And that's about it. I mean, and, it's just those things that you feel like you're missing something and you're not complete or whole, which is not really the case. You just had a different experience. And that's what I kind of try and help people understand and teach them is, and it's a little bit that I learned through narrative therapy when I studied that, when I was working on coaching, is that you can rewrite the story of your life through the values and principles and strengths that you've learned to grow up with. You don't have to. And that was where I was kind of saying earlier, where I allowed other people to kind of tell me my story and, how life was when I was growing up. Like, oh, well, you're not as great, you lived in a trailer park when you grew up, or you didn't have a father, or your parents are divorced, you're probably not going to go to college. It was just these things, these things. And I didn't have any career counselors or school counselors that ever sat down with me and said, hey, you can do anything you want to do. I was just kind of that kid off to the side that's probably never going to thrive or evolve. And I'm probably just going to work in the brake factory in a local town. And that's probably okay for me. Nobody really invested that time except for a few individuals. And so that's what I try to get people to understand is that a lot of that stuff doesn't matter, right? It's what you do with it. And it's recreating that story. And to where you're emerging from your story and you have these strengths and these values that you've built and developed because of that experience. And your experience can be very powerful and make you strong. And that can propel you forward.
I believe it was Wayne Dyer that said it's never too late to have a great childhood. You have some really interesting things that you're doing. You shared with me about a program that you called 22 Too Many. Can you share with our listeners about that?
Yeah, so 22 Too Many is a nonprofit veterans-based organization. And what they do is they highlight the fact or the statistic that there are 22 veterans that take their own life every single day in the country. And that has a lot of things to do with post-traumatic stress and some of their experiences, not just while they're in the military, but, throughout their entire life. And for whatever reason it is, they decided to take their own life. And so what the organization does is try to honor their service, their sacrifice that they've made by honoring them on a race. And so I took the time, I was like, okay, well, I'm an ultra runner, and it will give me a new sense of purpose, and actually a sense of healing, because I know many of veterans in my career that have taken their own lives. And so I thought it was, a win-win for both of us, where I kind of got a new sense of purpose to run. And then I also help them out at the same time by driving awareness. And what it is what they do is they send me a picture of a veteran who's, taken their own life. And it has their name on it, and they send me the story. And I read the story for myself the night before I go on the run, or I might read it a few times just to kind of get an understanding of what that person went through. And some of the stories are pretty detailed. And so I kind of take that with me on the run, and either pin it on my back or on my leg, their picture. And people see me out there while I'm running, and they're like, hey, and sometimes some of them don't say anything at all, except, hey, thanks for running for this, sergeant, or thanks for running for this private, or thanks for running for, Erica. And that kind of gives, when I hear people say that, that kind of gives me, like a whole sense of purpose and a calling, and a lot more energy and drive, especially when I'm starting to feel down and somebody's starting to pass me and they see it. I've had people run alongside of me for 30 minutes and they say, hey, can you tell me a little bit about this person? And I tell their story. And it's helping them keep their legacy alive. It's really very rewarding and healing for the family members to have veterans that are carrying these people on your backs, almost like they're angels on your back, and in a way I felt like that at times. you kind of get that sense that they're with you as you start to reflect through their stories and stuff as you run. And for me, I mean, like I said, that's very healing because I've known so many people that have gone through some really tough stuff. And for whatever reason, they decided to take their own life. People I've been very close to that I've gone through a lot. I mean, deployments, 15-month deployments, you know, we've survived some of the most horrific, you know, things, and they still 4 or 5 years later, you know, with families and children, and for whatever reason, they do that. And it's hard for a lot of us to understand. And I think that's also a way for me to try to, you know, try and understand why would they do this, you know, and then, you know, it just helps me kind of think through that. And then, like I said, give back to the veterans community and the families that have sacrificed so much, because it really is mostly about the family. So after the race is over, what I do is I take the picture that I ran with, I throw it in an envelope, I write a personal letter, I take the racing bib, you know, the number that they gave me, I put that in the envelope, and if I won any medals or got a participant medal, I throw that in there, I send it off to the organization, and they present it to the family members. And some of the family members put it in a little shadow box and put it up on the mantle or something, you know. But it's kind of a little memento or a piece of them, and that, you know, we're still thinking about them. We still remember them. We still want to, you know, honor their service and their legacy and everything that they've done, despite, you know how their life has ended. So
That's nice to bring awareness to the cause and also for the family to know that they're not forgotten. You've also done some work with court-appointed special advocate for children. Share with me about that.
yeah, so that's very near and dear to my heart as well. So court-appointed special advocate is a child advocate. It is somebody that goes through a couple weeks of training, or, you know, it varies by county, but most counties in the United States have this. There are some that don't. But it's a program called, it's CASA, and it's court-appointed special advocate. And what I do is I'm a volunteer that has been court-appointed to go in and work with children that are either in foster care or placement home. They have been removed from their family for some reason. Sometimes it's failed to provide for the child. Sometimes it's drugs and alcohol, you know, and sometimes there's abuse in the home or something. But these children, or in one family I'm working with, their mom took their life through the use of drugs. So now and they don't know who their father is. And so now they're a part of the court system. And there are hundreds and thousands of these children out there that are like this, that are in these situations, but they don't have anybody to speak on their behalf. And they have nobody to come in and mentor them and coach them and help them, because, you know, what they have known as normal is now gone. And now they're moving from one placement home to another, or one foster family to another, until they can find a new permanent residency, which is most of the time we try to get them back with a family member or the parents, depending on the situation, because we can still recover that. And sometimes that's the best option. But that's what we do is we provide. I'm an individual that comes in that cares about this child. You have several different people on the team. You have the court system, you have the attorney for the parents, you have the attorney for the children, you have the attorney for the state, you have, you know, the child services division. You have all these people, but there's nobody there to speak on behalf of the child. And so most of the kids that I work with are older boys, because I want to work with fatherless men. So, and the older boys really are the ones that are missing out in this program the most, is because it's harder to get volunteers to work with them. Most of the volunteers spend most of their time with the smaller children, but it seems to be the older boys that just don't have as many volunteers, you know, reaching out to take care of them or to help them. So I spend about 10 hours a month working on their case, you know, whether it be calling teachers and checking on grades, or calling the social worker and getting an update from them. Maybe I go and spend an hour playing basketball with them at the local basketball court, you know, just having a conversation with them, playing board games, just spending time with them. Maybe I go and spend an hour helping them with their homework one night, you know, and it's just me spending about 10 hours on their case, whether it's them or not. But usually I spend about 3 or 4 hours a week with them, or not a week, I'm sorry, a month. And they know that I'm going to come by. I'm consistent in their life, and that when it's time to go to the judge and I write my report, you know, that I'm speaking on behalf of what the child wants and what the child needs based off of my perspective. And usually the judges, they hold a lot more weight because you're the volunteer. You're not being paid just to take a side. You are a volunteer that's there for the child. And so our words have a huge amount of weight with the judges and what happens with these kids in the future. And actually what the kids want, because some kids want to go back home and some kids don't. And some kids want other things and have needs. And it's for us to help decide, you know, what that is. Because I make a lot of recommendations to the court about what some of the children have been through and maybe what they might need in order for them to thrive and continue to have a healthy, happy, productive life later on, and try and set these kids up for some kind of success. You know, and you know, I could talk about statistics of fatherless boys, but it's unfortunate that a lot of these kids, you know, that don't have fathers growing up, or, you know, will end up in some kind of system, whether, you know, mental health institutions, prison systems, or they become, you know, fatherless parents themselves, you know, because, you know, they've had children out of wedlock or found themselves in a unhealthy relationship or something. And it's just it's a domino effect. It continues to replicate. So for me, it's to get that. I want to help the youth and try and get after the problem that we're experiencing today. And, you know, with so many kids, 33% of the kids go home tonight and they don't have a father in the home. And so at least that, you know, I'm there to at least a few nights to kind of give them some kind of male mentorship, you know, that they can kind of look at and maybe be an example for them.
That's a good call for men who are wanting to volunteer for younger people who don't have fathers, not only in the court systems, but I make up in a lot of other areas, any way that they could volunteer. You were in Toastmasters. I'm a fellow Toastmaster. Tell me about your experience with Toastmasters.
Yeah, so it's been great. So I've been a Toastmaster for probably the greater part of 3 years. I've held several leadership positions all the way up to area director, which in my area there's 5 clubs that I'm responsible for. I'm about to end my tenure because it ends on June 30th. And so I'm doing that right now. I've been a vice president of public relations, the secretary, the sergeant of arms. I've done all kinds of leadership positions. When I first got started, it probably took me about 30 days to do my first speech because I was kind of nervous. There's a little bit of backstory to that, but and then 9 months later, I really hadn't done another speech. I was just showing up doing impromptu speaking and table topics, you know, and that's all I was really working on. I really wasn't working on anything, as far as education awards and leadership awards and stuff like that. I was just kind of participating in the weekly meetings. And then a buddy of mine, we weren't friends at the time, but he came in and he joined the club, and he's like, hey, you know, it looks like you're in the same stuff that I'm into. He's like, are you going to go to the speech contest? I'm like, no, I don't know. And nobody in our club really wanted to participate in speech contests. And I'm kind of one of those people that's like, you know what? Fine. If nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. Right. And so we got to have some kind of representation. I'm just not going to let, you know, us not have representation because, you know, that's just kind of me. And so I went to the speech contest and I was kind of really nervous. And they asked me a question, as far as the impromptu speaking goes, and I ended up winning first place. And so he called me as soon as the contest was over, and he's like, how'd you do? And I'm like, I got first place. And he's like, oh, man, that's so awesome. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm fired up now. I was like, it was amazing. I was like, I had no idea. I was so nervous. And when I got up there, everything just seemed to click. And then I went to the next contest and I won first place there. And he went there actually this time to support me. And I was just like, holy cow, I cannot believe this. I was like, they gave me 2 questions and I nailed and knocked them out of the park. And then the third contest I went to, which was the district level. I got up on stage and I'm ready to go and I'm fired up. I'm pumped up because it took me 2 hours to drive the contest. So I'm getting ready to go and they ask me a question and they say, tell us the first joke that you've committed to memory. And I was like, dead silence. I was like, I don't know any jokes. I'm not a funny guy. And I was like, and I started talking about how I was a direct, demanding, determined, you know, and I just started making, you know, not making things up, but I started explaining who I was and why I really didn't have that kind of funny bone in my body because, you know, and I kind of mentioned how I grew up and, you know, I've always had to, you know, have this incredible drive to get the things I needed because, you know, I just didn't have the kind of support in my life, you know, and I was always kind of dependent upon myself. And so I kind of went into that a little bit and everybody loved it, but I just didn't answer the question. So, I mean, I didn't, you know, that was the, you know, I didn't place in the top 3, but yeah, and I got done and I was like, man, and I was mad. I was like red in the face. I sat down and I'm like, man, I blew it. I embarrassed my club. I embarrassed myself. I'm like, I failed. And, you know, I started getting down on myself and it was bad. It was really bad. I mean, I probably could have threw an adult temper tantrum right then and there because I felt like I did so bad. And as soon as the next contestants went through, we had our intermission. So they were counting the votes and stuff. And I had about 10 people come up to me and say, you were amazing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? That wasn't amazing. That was horrible. And they're like, no. He goes, that was the toughest question I've ever seen asked in a contest, and you still nailed it. And I'm like, how did I nail it? And even like, no, you still had something to say, and you continued to work through the conversation. And, you know, I could never do that. You're so inspiring. And then I was like, well, you know, and I kind of started making me feel better because of the support that I was getting from these other people. And then the feedback that I was getting was all positive, even though I was kind of down on myself. And I thought I failed. And that was pretty awesome. And then I went back and then I knocked out 4 education awards that year in the next 3 to 6 months. And I won a Triple Crown for getting 3 awards in a year. But I actually did 4. So, but yeah, so that really kind of helped propel me and give me confidence moving forward. And I guess the amazing part about the whole process was when they asked me the question, I could feel like all the nervousness and the tension and the feelings and the tingling, you know, you get when you're like you don't know what to do. But I ended up pushing through and at least answering the question somewhat, you know, and explaining why I didn't have a joke, and still hit the time, you know, because you have to hit that 1 minute, 30-second mark. And so I still hit the time. I still got everything, the green light and everything. So overall, it was a great experience for me. Overcome some adversity, learned that I had a skill set that I really didn't know that kind of was untapped until I went in a contest that somebody else pushed me outside of my comfort zone, which is exactly what coaching's about. And me and him have been best friends ever since then. We've been a team, and, you know, I helped him through the international speech contest and helped him work through some of that stuff. And we've been kind of just pushing and driving each other the whole time. And that's really what Toastmasters has been about for me in my experience. It's just the constant learning in the process. And then the networking and the people. It's been great. It's just huge, awesome support.
I think Toastmasters is something everyone should try, especially nowadays. You know, it's like everything's social media and people really don't talk face to face and have to stand on their feet. And I was raised a shy guy, didn't feel like I had a voice. And it was so wonderful to get to that point where you felt you could just take on whatever was asked of you, you know, do the impromptu. And, you know, like you said, even though you didn't have an answer for the question, you were just being yourself. And, you know, some of the best speeches I ever heard were people just talking about something that they were familiar with, that they were comfortable with, and their personality came through that. And so Toastmasters is just a wonderful organization.
I'll probably be a member of it for life. I mean, it's been great to me. I'm working on becoming a distinguished Toastmaster. I've got some things to do this next year, but I mean, just the people in general that are a part of that organization have been extremely supportive, extremely helpful. And even when you're struggling, they're there to help you, to push you through those moments. Like, one of the things I struggled with was the roast, because I had to give a speech on a roast once. I had to roast somebody. I struggled to write that thing and I was like, I'm not a funny guy. And I don't like to make, you know, fun of other people. And I'm like, I just don't have the wisecracks. And I had to have people help me through that process. but it also taught me a lot about storytelling and writing and speech preparation and things like that that I didn't have before. I mean, I've spoken in front of tons of people on very sensitive topics in the military, you know, all the time, because I used to be a sexual assault response coordinator in the military. So you're talking about a very sensitive topic, and you're delivering that in front of a couple hundred people. And I always get nervous prior to all those presentations, but Toastmasters kind of teaches you how to get through some of that, to kind of overcome that. And it's just repetition. It's getting out there, it's being in front of people. And it's not necessarily the contest, you know, which are fun to do, but there's learning institutes that you get to go to all the time. And some of the learning institutes I've been in, they've helped people with their business. I've ran into people, they learn how to become better evaluators when it comes to speaking and how to listen better, because that's what evaluation does, is help you listen better, and pull some of that feedback in. And it's really helped people in their careers and propelled them forward. One of the guys that I really like his story, he talks about how he was in the Anheuser-Busch organization, and one of the guys came to him and asked him to give him some feedback on a presentation. And he kind of gave him like a 5-page evaluation, and he figured, either I'm going to have a job tomorrow or I'm not, you know? So, and then the next thing you know, a week later, the guy says, hey, you want to hop on a company jet and fly up to New York with me? I've got about 4 or 5 presentations I got to do. I want your feedback. And so the guy spent a week up in New York working with, you know, one of the top executives, you know, just because he had that Toastmaster mark or brand on him. And he did a great job evaluating his presentation, and he gave him a lot of great feedback that probably most people wouldn't give to him because they were afraid to evaluate him properly because of who he was. And so I think that's one of the great stories that I've heard. And I'm always, you know, like, wow, that's inspiring. Like, this is good stuff, you know, and there's real value here. And like I said, I get to practice my skill set every week. So,
yeah. Yeah. And for coaches, I think that element of the feedback part is, if there are coaches out there listening that have not experienced Toastmasters, being able to see the good in somebody in their speech is an incredible skill that you can sharpen, you know. And as new coaches, you know, sometimes it's challenging to not react to people and not see the good inside them, or who they could be. And so I think that's a good way to sharpen that skill.
I got one of the guys that I've been working with in one of the clubs that we're sponsoring, trying to get to. He's afraid to talk in front of people, but he's got a great story. But it's all self-limiting thoughts in his head. It's him telling himself, I'm not a great speaker, or I can't talk in front of people. But every time he gets up there, I'm like, you're better than me. You know, I want to be just like you. And you know, not that I haven't spoken in front of a lot of people, but I'm like, he's just started 3 or 4 months ago. And I'm like, wow, you have such a great story. You have so much knowledge and information in a message that you can put out there. You can help so many people. He's just struggling internally, like, to get it out. And he doesn't really need to practice it because he's already got it. He just needs to work on the confidence. And I mean, so many people I've seen that really, like, their personality, everything comes out of them after they've been at Toastmasters for 3 or 4 months, because they get that confidence, they get used to the people in the room, and they get comfortable, and they can start to become a little bit more vulnerable, and their story starts to come out, and it's amazing. I've heard so many great stories from people that have just decided to share in a Toastmasters meeting one day because they've been asked a specific question, or they bring a presentation or, you know, speech because it's part of their modules that they're working on, and they deliver it. And you can tell they're nervous when they first get up there, but the reaction they get afterwards, you can see their confidence, you know, just grow.
Tell me, what's on your bucket list?
So one of the things on my bucket list is I really want to run a 100-mile race. So I tried to do it 2 years in a row, and for whatever the reason or the other, it's failed through. Last year I threw out my back pretty bad, and I was down and out for a good 3 months over the summer with that back injury, and it kind of derailed a lot of things for me. And I really wasn't sure if I was going to come back or not to ultra running. And I talked to a guy on the phone, and I just reached out to a very popular celebrity ultra runner. I never thought he would give me a day in the life of being on the phone with him. but I just sent him a message and said, hey, you know, I've got this problem. I'm just wanted to know what your thoughts were about recovering from a back injury and stuff and ultra running. And he's accomplished some really great stuff. And I knew he was an endurance athlete who had been beat up and broken a few times. And he said, hey, here's my phone number. Give me a call. And I was like, okay. I was like, this is a joke, right? And picked up the phone, called him. And he said, hey, man, I went through the same thing that you're going through, like 10 years ago. He's, you know, we had a conversation and we talked through some things. And then a couple weeks later, some things started changing in my life. And the injury started to go away and dissolve. And I was back to running again. I ran a few ultra marathons since then. I ran 100 miles over 3 days in a what we call a stage race. So the first day was a 50K, which is about 31 miles. The second day was a 50 miler, and the third day was a 20K, which is about half marathon or so. You know, a total of 100 miles over the course of 3 days. It wasn't 100 miles in a day, but, you know, it's pretty close. And so that gave me a lot of confidence. I just was sick a couple weeks ago because I got bit by a tick and I got tick fever. So that kind of put me down and out for a week with bad fever, chills, and a bunch of other symptoms that kind of drained me. So this week has kind of been recovery week for me, and I'm trying to get back there. But there's some races in the future at the end of this year that I'm looking at to try and, you know, hit that 100 miler bucket list, you know, knock that off the list. It's something I just can't, it won't leave my mind. It's constantly, I'm eating at the back of my head, like, you have to do this, you have to do this. And maybe that's that one thing that I do that, you know, okay, I'm good with running now, you know, but maybe, I don't know, maybe, and a lot of people are like, no, you're going to hit that and you're going to want to do 200 miles. You're going to, you know, you just want to keep doing different stuff, you know, or 7-day stage race. But there will be different things like that come up. So who knows what happens, but that's the one little thing on my list that has been kind of nagging at me for the last few years. So
tell me about some of the things that you've got with your business. What kind of opportunities you have, presentations, programs, things like that?
So I'm always get the opportunity to speak. One of the things I am doing right now is I'm working through some presentations and I'm delivering them. I'm actually working on the District 8 Speakers Bureau for Toastmasters, so I am on that. So I do some stuff here locally and regionally. But anything else, you know, basically the one thing that I am doing right now with that is building organizational change through trust. And it's talking people through the process of building trust in an organization in order to create the change that you need to get the organization where you want it to go. So getting from where it is to where you want to go. And every organization goes through change at some point in time. And it's really just getting after that trust factor that everybody has, because you bring in new leadership or you're going through a new process and you have to build that trust. And I kind of walk people through that, how to capture people's strengths and use that to kind of propel them forward and kind of build those relationships in the organization, build relationships with key stakeholders in the organization, especially if you're a new leader walking in or you're an emerging leader. I think it's a really great presentation. I think I give a lot of people a lot of things to take home with them, some practical exercises during that presentation. It's kind of turning into more of a 2 to 3 hour workshop, because a lot of the feedback that I got was, you're given a lot of information and it's a short amount of time and it's a lot. So I'm kind of having to spread that out a little bit more and turn that almost into a workshop now, just to kind of deliver all the information that I need to kind of make, you know, get it from the beginning to the end without losing people in between. Because in a short amount of time, 60 minutes, you have to really cram some stuff in there and try and give people nuggets to walk away with. Can be challenging at times, but that's what Toastmasters does. It tries to help you through that. And then, you know, I got a couple of different coaching programs. The one flagship coaching program that I do have is helping men, emerging leaders, and veterans, fatherless men, develop a vision for their life. And that's really just creating a destination. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be at? Whether it be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years down the road, where do you want to be? Create that vision and then develop a mission, which kind of serves as a set of guardrails. So you can kind of make decisions a little bit easier. You have your kind of your left and right limits, because if you don't have a mission statement, what you're about, the purpose and the reason why you're going after this vision, it almost really kind of gets at your purpose and why you're called to this vision. And it can be for a lot of unique or different ways. It can be something that impacts your family. It can be just something that's impactful for you. Maybe you want to impact a community or a region or a state or the nation. You know, I've worked with all kinds of folks on different levels on what they want to achieve. And then developing the goal setting process, right? And then working with you for that first 90 days. So I'm a big 90-day goal setter. I like quarterly goals. That yearly goal thing is too much for me. It's just because it's so far out there. It's like it's unreachable. It's your constant, you know, and yours is a long process. So I like the quarterly goals. And I kind of help people break those things down a little bit. And then the second one is the F5. And that's what I call it. I'm in the Midwest, so, you know, F5 tornado. But it's family, fitness, faith, fellowship, and freedom. And the freedom really stands for is freeing up your time, becoming more efficient, more effective in your processes that you do daily. And that kind of gives you more time back. And, you know, we go through those 5 key components that I think are extremely important in a person's life. And I work with them through that process, you know, and kind of trying to figure out which ones are doing real well and which ones aren't, and which ones we need to work on, you know, and maybe the, you know, the one that you rank the lowest isn't the one you need to work on right now. So we kind of try and figure that stuff out. And maybe the one you think you need to work on, you know, 2 or 3 months down the road, you realize, actually, no, that one's pretty good. I need to, you know, shift over here and do this one. So I kind of work through those, try and help them through that process of developing those 5 components of life.
You got an ebook you're working on this month. Tell me about what's that all about?
Yeah, so it's really an upgrade to some content that I wrote about Henry Ford and his thoughts on fear. And it seemed to take off. So even though I wrote that 2 years ago, it seems to be the one piece of content that I've wrote that is constantly at the top of the list every month. And so I really didn't know why. I was just like, I really wasn't sure. So I just decided to start Googling some stuff. And what I realized was fear was like one of the number one things that people are Googling. And so I'm like, wow, there's really something here about this fear factor, you know, whether it be I'm afraid to speak in front of people, or I'm afraid to, you know, talk to my spouse about a specific topic, or, you know, whatever it is, everybody has something that they struggle with. And I actually start to dive into that fear and what I thought Henry Ford was talking about, and really kind of getting after that. And I give about, I think, I'm not quite finished with it yet, but it's around, I think, 33, 34, maybe 35 different ways to overcome fear. And it really kind of goes to the process of why we have fear, what the different types of fear are. And it's really almost a all-inclusive guide on how to do that. And I'm not sure how many pages it is right now. I couldn't tell you. I still haven't gone through the editing process. It's in the draft, but it'll be done in the next couple weeks.
Kirby, how do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, so it's kind of really simple. It's I want to be remembered as a man of faith, a protector of freedom, and a family man, and that's really it. Nothing mind blowing. Nothing. I just just very simple. I serve my country. I love my God, and my family was very important for my life. And hopefully, and I guess maybe the third one is probably the one that I'm probably working on the most, with working with the Fatherless men, and and all the other things that I'm doing with CASA and all these things. But I think that just being that example, and I can set for my children, will kind of help our nation, in the world moving forward. And maybe just needs one person to set the example. I say a lot, I say, watch what you say, because the people or the future of your nation is at your knees, right? So it's what we say and what we do today is influencing our youth. And that's what they're going to be in the future. And I remember that as a kid. I remember the things that were said in front of me and how they were said. and some of the challenges in my parents' relationships and stuff like that, the things that I overheard, the things that I watched, the people that influenced me. And I probably didn't get the start that I probably would have hoped for, or that I probably could have had, just because people were kind of loose with their words and what they said and did and how they acted. And I really think that being a good example, and just imagine yourself as a billboard every day. Thousands of people are driving by looking at you every single day, and you're influencing somebody. And it only takes a matter of seconds to influence a person, good or bad. And I really think it's important that we show our youth, especially the ones that are knee high, set an example for them. If I can do that as a father, and show my kids how to be a good husband and how to be a good father, and if I can replicate that, and that would be replicating it times 4 right now, I'm off to a pretty good start. So,
and we don't always know when others are paying attention. So,
and that goes to the compound effect too, because if they grow up, when they grow up, they may have children. And I mean, it just, what I would really like to do is create families that are on fire, that they're just on fire, and they create this unique family unit, and they get after it every single day. And, they're productive, happy, healthy members of society.
How do our listeners get a hold of you if they would like to find out about the services that you offer?
So there's several ways. You can get after me on Facebook or Twitter. Really, all you have to do is in the search box, type Kirby Ingles. I'm probably one of the only ones that are going to pop up. Unique name. But really, if you want to go to the homepage, it's www.kirbyingles.com. And that's, all the links to all the social media sites I'm on are out there. The Instagram, the Twitter, the Facebook, the groups that I host and things like that are all in there. So really there's a smorgasbord of things that you can kind of chase me down on. But really the homepage is www.kirbyingles.com.
Cool. And we'll include all the links that we talked about today. I want to thank you for being here today, Kirby. Thank you for serving our country. Thank you for all the things that you do working with CASA, and also thank you for working with families of military and also fatherless men. Come back sometime. We'd love to have you here.
All right. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you for joining us today with Awaken the Mind, hosted by David Juhas.
Awaken the mind, you need to understand. If you can't, you must, and if you must, you can. Now that I got you, let me put you in a trance. Got you feeling hypnotic, your mind, let me massage it. Your thoughts are getting quiet, your stress subsiding. You starting to see images, but it ain't no mirages. Think it's time to calibrate. Take a breath and concentrate. Get into your subconscious. Time to feel the energy, the brain waves. Let's go deep into your memory. Beware of self, let the worries melt. All you see is you and you don't see no one else. Auditory digital, talking to yourself. It might seem bizarre, a feeling you never felt. This is your time to shine. Awaken the mind, the NLP and hypnosis guide. Yeah.